Welcome to week one of our series, Look Through Luke. We want to spend the next couple of weeks, maybe a little bit longer than that, looking through the Gospel of Luke and some interactions that Jesus has in that Gospel and what that can teach and can tell us about three things, really specific things that are the goals and the aims for this series. We want to understand how Jesus' interactions and the ones that we're going to pick out as we go through this adventure, looking through Luke together, how those interactions shape our personal character development. How does following Jesus influence and affect the way that we think, the way that we speak, and the way that we act? So as I am learning about Jesus, as I'm taking in information from his interactions, what is that helping me to understand in becoming like Jesus? So that's the first goal of this series. The second one is how, as I am learning, again through the interactions, looking through Luke, that Jesus is having with people, how is that helping me with the vision and the mission of the community that I am a part of? So if you are a part of Peel or Ramsey Elim Community Churches, you will be, I hope, confident that our vision and our mission is to make disciples, to include people, to invite people to know Jesus, and to bless people. So how do these interactions help me to belong to my community? Where is the DNA being evidenced? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it sound like? How do I respond to those things? And is that being evidenced as my belonging to this community, that we are functioning in a way that looks like, okay, they are from that place, that is lining up with what they say they believe? How is learning about Jesus' interactions through Luke, how is that helping me to belong to the community that I say I'm a part of? And the third thing, the third aim and goal for this series is to help us live out what we say we believe. So not just by way of identity, not just by way of being affiliated with a community of believers, and going further than my awareness of my personal character development, which is the first one, being a part of the community, but how do I live out what I believe? Where is the application of my faith that is central to us, that's massively important to us, that we don't just produce these things so that we can tick them off the list for another week, but they are shaping and informing and helping me to work out how I apply the things that I say I believe. So they are the goals for this series. It's going to take us 8 weeks total, this being week 1, 7 to come. And we're going to lift out some interactions from the Gospel of Luke. If you have never read the Gospel of Luke before, this is the time to do that. This is your encouragement. And if you have read the Gospel of Luke many more times than you can count or remember, this is another exciting opportunity for you to refresh yourself with the Word of God and to get back into the Gospel of Luke. You might have reading plans or commitments with other people, all that kind of good stuff going on. That's brilliant, and we want to encourage you to do that. But really specifically, we are going to focus in through the Gospel of Luke for this series. So read ahead. By all means, you are only going to strengthen yourself and others by doing that. You're going to feel prepared and informed when we get to the things that we want to talk about. But one of the kind of central devices that Luke, the author of the Gospel of Luke, uses is travel, or is journey. That's kind of one of the main literary devices that Luke uses, and so we will use that too, and we will move through in order. But there are some central and exciting things that we see in Luke 19. So for this week, this kind of introduction to the series, to its goals, to its ideas, I'm going to jump ahead and I'm going to share something with us today from Luke 19, and then from next week we will start kind of journeying through with a little bit more sense of order and structure. But it's important, I think, that we focus in this week on Luke 19. There is a moment and an occasion in Luke 19 verses 1 through to 10, and I'm going to read them in a minute for us. But it's an encounter. Jesus has an encounter with Zacchaeus, and that may be familiar to you, which is great. And if it's not, don't panic. I'm going to introduce us to that very soon. But in this encounter, that Jesus says something that is really central to what Luke wants to introduce us to throughout his gospel, throughout everything that Luke is writing. So Luke is really drawing our attention and underlining the historical significance of Jesus as Messiah, and he's gathered sources and spent a ferocious amount of time and energy and effort, and somebody has invested a significant amount of money in Luke to be able to bring Luke's gospel together for us, to have this record and these accounts and these stories of these journeys in the way that Luke presents them with skill and intelligence and craft to be able to connect with. But right in the heart of that, right in the center of that, Jesus says to Zacchaeus, the Son of Man has come to seek and save the lost. And that's really important for us. That's massive, that as we kind of recalibrate ourselves and get to grips with what is happening internally and in the wider world externally, that we remember the God that we know and that we love and that we serve, and some of his goals and priorities, and do they look like our goals and priorities? So we want to encourage you in that, and you will hear from other voices in the weeks to come. It won't just be me delivering these messages for us, but keep a hold of all of that as we move through the next 7 weeks, as we get into some of these thoughts and some of these ideas, as we look to encourage and to motivate and to look for the spaces where God wants to speak to us through the Gospel of Luke and Jesus' interactions in them. Hold on to, remember those goals, those aims for this series. How is my character being formed and shaped? Where am I evidencing that I am a part of and I belong to this community? And then how is it helping me to live out the things that I say I believe? I hope that makes sense for you. I hope you're excited about it. It's going to be a good series. We're going to have some exciting thoughts and calls to action in there. I'm going to read to kick us off Luke chapter 19 verses 1 to 10. This is what it says. He entered Jericho and was passing through. And behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was rich. And he was seeking to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd he could not, because he was small in stature. Verse 4. So he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way. And when Jesus came to that place, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. Verse 6. So he hurried and came down and received him joyfully. And when they saw it, they all grumbled. He has gone in to be the guest of a man who was a sinner. And Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold. And Jesus said to him, Today salvation has come to this house, since he also is a son of Abraham. Verse 10. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. In these 10 short verses, there is an incredible amount going on, and Luke very intelligently uses literary devices kind of in a ring to give us these 5 cameos that happen in order and then in reverse order, but with very different things happening. And if you're exciting like me and want to get into those things, then I encourage you to do that in your own time. But there are some things really quickly that I want to lift out for us in this week 1 of this series of Look Through Luke. This interaction that Jesus has with this man who we know from the text is not well received in his community. Why? He's put himself in that position. He's decided to become a tax collector, and the role within that community and kind of the system that would have been used to harvest tax meant that he's kind of got one over on people. He's got the schedule of works and knows when things need to be taken, and would have developed through infamy, because the text tells us that he's rich, a reputation for exploiting people, taking advantage of people, probably not being honest with people about what was owed and when and to who and how. And so Zacchaeus has developed a reputation within the wider community that has done damage, and so he doesn't have a good relationship with the wider community. How else are we confident of that? Well, when Jesus comes through Jericho, Zacchaeus doesn't go out of his way to ask for a position within the crowd to see Jesus, probably because he knows how he would have been received in that environment. And so he, to avoid kind of what he knew was likely to happen, commotion and getting in trouble and being amongst people who don't really want him to be amongst them, he goes on ahead of where Jesus is going to climb a tree. I'm confident if you've encountered this story or anybody sharing this story with you before, you'll be familiar with some of these themes and these ideas. But to help refresh and remind you that it's uncommon for anyone really to climb a tree to get a vantage point of a parade. It's unusual, it's a strange thing to do. It's extra specially strange for a man of status and wealth to do that. So Zacchaeus is very aware of what he's doing, and he is doing it on purpose because he is not welcome in his community because of the decisions that he has made and the way that he has lived up until this point. And so the crowd are with Jesus and moving through, and Zacchaeus is kind of hoping that by the time Jesus gets to the tree that he's hiding in, that most of the crowd will have dispersed. It's likely to have been on the way out of town, and Jesus is kind of making a point that he's not hanging around in Jericho. He's got somewhere to be, he has things to do, and so the people are already a little bit grumbly and a little bit upset. It's a little bit of a shunning to their hospitality, and then Jesus arrives at the tree where Zacchaeus is, and Jesus can see him and calls him out of the tree. And so Zacchaeus' kind of worst nightmare has come true, that this shame is kind of present in this interaction, in this moment, and the crowd are expecting Zacchaeus to receive his comeuppance. They're expecting him to get a dressing down, they're expecting him to be told off, they're expecting him to be told by Jesus that the things that he has been doing, the way that he's been treating the community, the role that he has taken within the community is unjust and is unfair, and to correct his actions and to rebuke him. But instead, Jesus does entirely the opposite. Jesus has rejected the hospitality of the crowd, has made it clear that he's making his way out of Jericho and isn't hanging around until he has an encounter with Zacchaeus up a tree, and then says, "Hey, I need you to come down because I'm coming to hang out with you. I need to spend some time with you." And this again just adds to the frustration. But what Jesus has done very cleverly and not so subtly when we are looking for it is he's removed the heat from Zacchaeus and placed it on himself. The fury of the crowd and the tension of that interaction has been taken from Zacchaeus, and Jesus becomes the bearer of that grudge. Jesus becomes the bearer of that heat, of that tension, of that anger, of that frustration. And so they withdraw into Zacchaeus' house, and there are other things that are happening here, but for time we need to move on. And so the crowd begins to grumble, and they make an external assessment of who is worthy to be the recipient of love, of who is worthy to be the recipient of grace and of mercy and of kindness and of goodness. And Jesus is not afraid of the crowd's opinion and is confident of who he is and why he is doing the things that he is doing. There is this interaction that happens, and Jesus is invited into Zacchaeus' house, and Jesus responds to his invitation of hospitality. And then let me remind you from verse 8. Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, "Behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold." And Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, since he also is the son of Abraham, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." Zacchaeus makes this statement, and it's exaggerated on purpose. It's culturally understood that it's an exaggeration, but it's a statement of intent. Why does this happen? Because those who have been the recipients of costly love, remember, Jesus has put himself in a position to absorb the wrath of the crowd, to deflect and defer the attention from Zacchaeus in his peak of shame, to take it onto himself. Jesus receives Zacchaeus' invitation of hospitality and extends costly love to him. And the recipients of costly love are empowered and motivated to then in turn offer costly love. It's going to cost Zacchaeus, literally. He knows that he cannot afford, in a very real sense, to give back the amounts and to everybody that he has defrauded. But in his exaggerated statement, he is making those first steps in that process of repairing his relationship that he has damaged with the community. And an interaction with costly love has empowered and motivated Zacchaeus to extend the same principle, to extend costly love to those that he is in community with, to begin to repair the damage that he has created and he has caused, to take ownership and responsibility for his own character development, to see and to understand what identifies him as a part of his community, and to live out the things that he has had an experience of what he says he believes. I hope in that really quick kind of summary and overview of the depth of this text that it inspires you to read it and to spend some time with it and to to hopefully talk to somebody about it. We want to encourage you in these videos and in these times to do a number of things, but primarily for you to seek God and to hear and to respond to Him through the reading of the Bible, through prayer, and through connection with community. They are kind of the three pillars that are going to help us make this make sense. And so we're going to create a space at the end of this video where you can pray. And again, we'll count that down. There'll be instructions on screen, so you don't need to panic about that. It'll be clear that that's what we need to do. But also, I want to extend a request to you in the hearing of this and in your further study and reading, hopefully, of this. I want to ask you to do two things. I want to ask you to speak to somebody within the community of believers about it. And you might be watching this on your own, and that's okay. So there needs to be a way for you to reach out and to connect with somebody. And if all else fails, that could be me. You can reach out to me. My details are on screen, and you can reach out and talk to me about it. But hopefully there are others within our community of believers that you can reach out and talk with them about the story of Zacchaeus. And maybe you've heard it 1,000 times. And what have you learned today? Or maybe you want to teach somebody something from it. Well, you're going to need to reach out and connect with them to be able to teach them from it. That's the first thing, for you to connect with somebody in the community of believers and talk to them about what you have learned, what you have discovered, what you've rediscovered, what you want to teach, what you want to share from the story of Zacchaeus. The second thing is this, to connect with somebody in the wider world, to share with them the things that you have learned from the story of Zacchaeus, to be brave and to communicate some of the things that God has spoken to you about, or maybe in that connection with somebody else in the community, what somebody else has taught or told or encouraged you, or what you have shared with them, but for you to put the principles of the kingdom of God into somebody else's hand. In the same way that we see Zacchaeus and his response to being the recipient of costly love, it encourages us to think about our actions and our response to do the same. And I want to kind of finish and end week one with the question, where do you want to start this series? There are three positions that I want to lift out to help us think about that I think are our options. We can start from the position of the rejected Zacchaeus. And from my notes here, his pursuit of status couldn't change his stature. What do I mean by that? That he made some decisions to pursue a career, to pursue a way of life, to look for monetary gain, but he couldn't remedy his stature with his status. I hope that makes sense to you, but we can start from that position. We can start from the position of a rejected Zacchaeus and looking for our status to cover our stature. And when we have an encounter with Jesus, we realize how ridiculous that is. There is no amount of money that can undo the damage done to our community when we live from a place of seeking status to cover the awareness of the failings of our stature. But we can choose to live from that space, and we can choose to continue to do damage from that space, and we can choose to look to persevere in these pathways of selfishness and narrow living and exclusivity and trying to present externally that we have everything together. But I would remind you of, look how far before an interaction with Jesus it got Zacchaeus. It created deep wounds in his community that isolated him from people, and he was not welcome to become a part of them. It was only after an encounter with Jesus that he began the work to repair the damage that he had done. So that's the position one that we can take. I wouldn't recommend or encourage that position, but develop awareness of it, because without awareness we can't change it. So you need to be aware. If that is your position today, what do you want to do about it? If you are in the position of rejected Zacchaeus, what do you want to do about it to change the way that you are treating other people? The second place that I think we can be is grumbling in the crowd. The crowd had made an assessment of who deserved the costly love that Jesus demonstrated, and they had decided that it wasn't to be Zacchaeus. I think too often it's easy to fall into that space where there is a false sense of security with the voices that are grumbling alongside of us, to lose sight of Jesus. There was the potential for the crowd to have an interaction, to have an encounter with Jesus, but their grumbling based on who they felt was worthy disqualified them from that space. That their deciding of who was in and who was out actually distanced them from the Messiah. I think but we can also find ourselves in that position that we can get swept up in the grumbling of the crowd. We can look for what everybody else is saying is okay, for signing off on behavior patterns, thought patterns, and speech patterns that are not of, from, or for God. Remember, an encounter with costly love will look to do the same for others. It is empowered and will extend costly love to others, not sit in judgment or complaint or grumbling or moaning or looking for who's in and who's out, not looking for the external signs of what is or is not acceptable. That's the second position that, if we're not careful, we can assume. And then the third position that I want to encourage you to look for and to speak to God to live from is the place of the accepted Zacchaeus. The recipient of costly love positions himself to offer costly love to others and is already on mission at that point. Zacchaeus doesn't need to be given the appropriate tract or alpha course or stream to be in. Those things are great and we love those things, but that wasn't Zacchaeus' response. Zacchaeus' response was to extend that costly love to others. He didn't wait to be told to do that. He didn't wait to be taught to do that. He didn't wait for the right program to do that through. He didn't wait for the right book to read to do that. And I hope you can hear what I am saying in that. We love resources. They help us. We are producing them to help our discipleship journeys too. But a response to costly love is empowered and is keen to offer the same to others. So think about those three positions. Think about where you start this series from. Think about where you want to be. Think about what you want to be moving towards in your character development, your belonging in our community of believers, and what that looks like, and then how you live out the things that you believe. To wrap up these messages, we're going to take the last 5 minutes with a summary of some of the things that I have talked about, or whoever is sharing with us in the appropriate week has talked about, and in those 5 minutes to present to us an opportunity to pray. I hope you are well, be brilliant, love well, and we'll see you soon.